Hi, I'm Dr. Caroline Leaf, and welcome to my show, The Dr. Leaf Show. If you haven't yet subscribed, press the little subscribe button on the bottom of your screen and you'll be notified when new episodes come out, and you'll be kept up to date with all things relating to mind and mental health. So in the studio with me today, I have my handsome husband of 30 years. We've been married for 30 years this year, and we're going to be talking about a very interesting story that Mac had to overcome, and that was addiction to alcohol. Mac became, over a period of time, became an alcoholic in the early days of our marriage, and it nearly broke our marriage up completely. And the story of how he changed and what happened is just so incredible that I really wanted to share it with you, to just then bring the principles that we and the science behind the decisions that Mac made and that he chose to make in the process. So, do you mind us talking about your...
No, not at all. I mean, if you can help other people, that's the most important thing.
And you shared this story, and it's a very powerful story, and I've even put the story into one of my books. But it was, if I can just set up the story and then hand over to you.
Sure.
So Mac and I had been married for probably about 3 or 4 years, and Mac's drinking started getting worse and worse. And he was doing extremely well in his business, and it was just a situation of drinking, like the drinking was going from, during the course of the day, it was just increasing all the time, and the different types of drinks. And we had in our house, since we come from South Africa, in our house in South Africa, we had a pub in it, and it was filled with thousands of dollars worth of alcohol. And this was where Mac used to hang out a lot in the evenings when he came home, and it was getting worse and worse and worse. And we had 4 children, and it got to the point where we had just had our 4th child, and that she was just a newborn baby, and my kids were quite close in age, and we had gone out to friends for dinner, and Mac had got really drunk, and he wouldn't let me drive the car, and we were driving home, and I was stupid enough, I should have overridden that decision, and I should have driven, but I didn't. And anyway, we got home safely, which was an absolute miracle in itself. And that's the night I realized that this was not going to carry on, that this was this far and no further. I didn't want to bring my children up with an alcoholic father. I didn't want to expose them to that. The science of epigenetics, which is the science of the decisions that we make, stimulate the genes, and genes will then express and form the things that we need in our body to survive, including our memories, and it builds on memories. So whatever you're thinking about and whatever you're putting in your body influences how your genes express. And essentially, I knew that this passed through the DNA, through the sperm and the ova, and these patterns that the children were observing with Mac drinking could easily have passed on to my children. So I wasn't going to risk my children's future in terms of that, and I also didn't want my children to grow up in that toxic environment, because when Mac was drunk, it was very unpleasant. We used to have, I used to get mad at him, and it was just stressful, and he was never physically abusive, but he was verbally abusive and didn't remember anything the next day. And I used to say to me, like, the split personality, it's like you turn into someone that I'd say to you, turning to someone that I didn't know, I didn't recognize, and then I would be so upset, and then I've got these babies that would see me upset. So it was just a really toxic situation. Maybe some of you can relate to this, maybe some of you are going through it. I've just said it in a little few words, but it was very painful. It was very, very difficult. In any case, this situation, we got back that night, and I stayed up all night. And I remember I'm a Christian, and I believe in God and love, and I decided I'm going to go through the Bible. Mac really believed that the scripture was important, so I thought, let me find all the scriptures that I could find relating to how you should be in what relationships, loving relationships should look like, and all that kind of stuff. And I wrote a letter to Mac, and when he woke up the next morning, I actually presented him with that letter, and that letter was basically saying to him that I love you, I will never leave you, but I cannot live with you in the situation. You're going to have to choose between me and the kids. You remember that time?
I do.
Or you're going to have to choose this lifestyle, but I'm not going to bring the kids up with this. I'm not going to subject myself or them to this anymore. And I was going to move to another city. I said, I've got my bags packed. You have to make a choice right now what you're going to do. So I'm going to hand over to you.
Yes, well, I understand the epigenetic part of it. I just didn't want to admit I was an alcoholic. I started drinking at the age of 13. My parents drank. So the environment was a drinking environment, and I drank right throughout school. And so I was always drinking, and then started to do very well in business, and drank over lunchtime, meetings, and all afternoon, and drank on the way home, and drank in the evening, and eventually just became constant days of drinking and drinking. And Caroline is right. I wasn't physically abusive, but I was verbally abusive, and I just wasn't a very nice person to be around. And when I sobered up, well, that was different. But I mean, it was always happening. And I think the first important point is you have to recognize that you have an addiction, or you are an alcoholic, or something like it. You have to accept that fact. And when Caroline presented me with the letter and with all the scriptures related, I had to accept that I was an alcoholic, or I was addicted to alcohol. And then I think once you accept that, you can make the decision to change, because I made a choice to change.
On the spot.
On the spot.
Literally that same day. That same moment.
Yes, I took Caroline down to our bar. I emptied all the liquor.
Down the sink. Thousands of dollars.
And I put it in the car and went to a bookshop, a ministry bookshop. Bought a whole lot of booklets about the Word and faith and Bible relationships and things like that, and filled up the bar with all of this stuff, so that every time I felt like a drink, I was grabbing a book, reading a book, and that really helped me. So, the Word of God is alive, living, and it's got the power to overcome those addictions. But the important point was that I had to choose. And I mean, looking at this beautiful woman who's been faithful to me in spite of those things in the beginning of our marriage, and stuck by me and so on. I mean, the choice was easy in that sense. It was hard in the sense of, giving up something that I'd grown accustomed to living daily with, and that was alcohol. But choice is all powerful, and I know you have the stats that most addicts give up through choice.
Yeah, that basically 86 to 93% of people that are in some sort of an addiction give up through choice, not through other drugs or other management, because a lot of them, to get people out of addiction, most times they are put on other medications to actually help them to control the addiction. So it's like transferring from one to...
Or go through some kind of course.
Go through some kind of course where they're told that they are always an alcoholic, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, or once an addict. And I think it comes around to the point of what is addiction? Addiction means consumed by. And science shows us that the top addiction, this is so interesting because there's 7 different addictions, and I'm going to put them up on the screen now and you can have a look at them. But the top addiction is love. And humans are wired for love. That's what a Nobel Prize winning scientists, not just one, a whole lot of scientists have shown, and it's collective research over the years, that we are wired for love. Every part of our brain, every part of our body, every circuit, every protein is wired for the positive. And so our natural inclination is to be filled and consumed by the positive, to be consumed by love. In fact, very recent research shows that more people die annually from the lack of love, which is amazing, than from any other disease that you can think of. And people are dying from lack of love. So when we talk about an addiction is normal if we're getting love, if it's in the love zone, I like to say. But if you're not getting that correct kind of love, or something's gone wrong in your life, you are basically transferring that and becoming addicted to the wrong thing. And generally, if you have a toxic addiction like Mac had with alcoholism, there's something that is going on in the past. You are trying to mask out some sort of something that's happened, and it could be a whole series of things that had happened. And it took Mac a long time to admit that there was issues from his past. I don't know if it was a pride issue, if it was you can maybe speak to that, but it was when you started realizing that there were things in your past that you were not dealing with, that led you to become, yes, you were exposed and
probably,
you had access.
But I mean, I think one of the main points is access to alcohol. My parents drinking alcohol, me starting at the age of 11, drinking 12, 13 onwards. It just was a lifestyle. And that's the problem, because you get into a lifestyle and sometimes you can't always admit that the lifestyle is wrong. You know what I'm saying? And that's where you have to examine your lifestyle. What was it doing to the family? But I have to say this, that this faithful, beautiful woman, she prayed for me for 11 years.
It was 11 years by the time he got out of the... Because it was nearly 7, 8, 9 years of alcoholism that he went through.
So if any of you listening here, any wives here or any husbands here facing the same issue, never stop praying. Power of prayer is truly amazing. and keep at it, keep faithful, and so on. I mean, 30 years later, we're still together.
Exactly.
But I could have made the wrong choice. I could have said, I want to stick with alcohol. I don't want to listen to you. I like you. Don't make me do things I don't want to do. You know, that kind of, I've seen that kind of reaction from people, and they'll say, well, you know, go your way, and I want to do my way. And then 4 kids suffer, marriage suffers. It's so terrible. But meanwhile, you can quit it. You have everything there available to quit it. And Caroline was faithful to help me through it, and I've been free from it for 20 years
20
now.
odd years now that Mac has been free from alcoholism. And there were times in that after that day when you chose not to. I think it took about 3 or 4 months before you didn't ever touch another drink, but there was definitely reactions and emotions tied to the whole situation.
I think you're drinking whiskey and all kinds of stuff, and so your body gets ravaged. So there's a process where your body will retune, redefine
You've got to rewire.
itself.
Your body has to rewire, because everything that you put into your body, whether it's liquid or whether it's food, is going to change your body and your brain. So thoughts change your brain, and whatever you consume is going to change your brain. And so your body has to wire back again, because alcohol wires it in a toxic direction, and it comes back again. And so when you stop, you're literally like an addict coming off. But the interesting thing is that Mac had drunk enough alcohol as an alcoholic, had been an alcoholic for a long enough time, and had consumed enough alcohol in large quantities for him to have he should have had fatty liver disease, and he was getting extremely overweight. Mac is 65 pounds lighter than what he was at that point, so he did pick up a lot of weight. And there was bad eating patterns. We've always eaten healthy, but Mac would want a lot of sugary things. So those were things that you had to learn to change.
This is it. It messes you up. I think that everybody says the big problem is cocaine or heroin and so on, but let me tell you, alcohol, I think, is
very insidious.
It's insidious and is the biggest problem.
If it's not controlled, so we're not saying that you can't drink, it's up to you, but if you can control it, that is a very vital thing. And what happened with Mac's life is he couldn't control it. And he was in an environment of patterns where his parents drank a lot, and his mom was very unhappy, and his mom had a very traumatic childhood, wonderful woman, but had a very traumatic childhood, and battled in her marriages, had multiple marriages and divorces, and that definitely affected Mac. And I think it took a long time before you could deal with the pain of that instability that your mom, mixture of instability and stability that his mom provided for him. So there was definitely a lack and a need inside of him. First when I can remember when we first met, before we even got married, it was quite hard for you to, your back was sore one day and I wanted to give you a back massage, and you weren't used to someone actually hugging you or holding you. You didn't grow up with that, and it was quite foreign for you to have someone giving you a massage where your shoulders were sore and your back was sore, and that came from a lack of touch as a child. So and that's called cutaneous deprivation. And he was put in boarding school very young. So there's a whole bunch of reasons. So what I'm saying is that addiction is a good word, except if it goes wrong. So when we don't have that natural love satisfied, which is what Mac's mom loved him, there's no doubt about that, but she had so many issues of her own that she could not be the mother to him that he needed, and that definitely played out in how he as a young adult played out his life, and he hit that pain, and his healing came definitely as we had the children. As he saw, like you'd often comment as we had our children one after another, and the amount of time I would spend with him. And he would often say things to me which gave me clues to why he got addicted. Why do you spend so much time with the children? Why do you and he'd never, it was like foreign for him. He'd never seen that kind of love of spending hours. And he was an incredible father, still is an incredible father, would spend hours building Lego with his kids. But it was something foreign. So what I'm saying here is that our past is something that can become toxic, but our past doesn't have to dictate the future. Mac didn't drink his life away. Mac didn't destroy a relationship, and it could have. I tell you now, when he was in his years of alcoholism, there wasn't a day that didn't go by that I didn't think of divorcing Mac, where I just could not take it anymore. When he'd come home from work and he was drunk again, but somehow I had chose to push through and to fight through. And you may be in a relationship where you are being physically abused because of alcoholism, well then your safety and your children's safety has to come first. So then staying with that person is not a good idea, and you need to get help. And even the verbal abuse can break you down. I mean, there's a part in your brain called the ACG, which is the anterior central gyrus, and it's a part in the middle of your brain. And when people go through, this is so interesting, it's a big part, you've heard me teach on this a lot. where the front part of it's the part of your brain that when you're in emotional pain, your whole brain is always responding, but when you're in emotional pain, that part of your brain will light up, really fires up. When you are in physical pain, that part also fires up. So it's the part of your brain that registers pain. And because your brain is driven by your mind, they're two separate entities that work together. Your mind is one and your brain is one. Because your mind works through your brain then will respond to your mind. So your ACG will respond in the same way to emotional and physical pain. So the point that I'm making here is that my ACG was experiencing emotional pain when Mac went through that. He had emotional pain inside of him. That physical pain is dangerous. If you are physically in danger, as I stress again, please don't think I'm telling you to stay in that relationship. If you are physically in danger, you need to get out of that and get help as soon as possible and get protection for you and if you have children. The emotional pain, don't think that that's not as dangerous. It is very dangerous, and sometimes you may have to separate yourself from that person. And I remember there were days when Mac was particularly verbally abusive, and it was really, really hard for me to deal with it. And I would actually make sure that I would be quite relieved when he went off to work. So I had my own private practice and business and so on. But there were sometimes weekends where I would actually just put my kids in the car and take a drive and go out for a few hours away from Mac so that I could calm down and that kind of thing and come back and get the courage. But I can't tell you enough about in terms of quantum physics. And I talk a lot about quantum physics because quantum physics really helps us understand the impact that we have as humanity on our own brains and on our relationships. And that you can't just divorce a relationship from and think, oh, well, I'm divorced from that person, or I'm not going to be near that person and they're not going to affect me. When you have a relationship and you love someone, or someone has in some way, you're in a relationship with someone, there's what we call quantum entanglement, which is a principle where once a relationship is set up, there's a connection. So it doesn't matter how far apart you are, you're still going to have an impact on each other. And that's why forgiveness is very important.
True.
And I think a very big part of our healing of our relationship was I had to do a lot of forgiving to Mac because of what he had put me and the kids through. And not that I was a saint through the whole thing. There were times when I really got upset and got mad and whatever. And he had to forgive his mom. You had to go back into the past and you had to go through and find areas. And that when you forgive, you disentangle the pain from the situation and you reconceptualize the situation and you rebuild new wiring in the brain, and you can change things and you can create a new destiny. So you can rewrite the past, which is very powerful, which is what we chose to do. We chose to do that.
Why don't you speak about that in quantum physics, retroactive
causation. It's one of my favorite things to teach about how you can actually, the future can change the past. And I know that always sounds so weird when I start saying
I prefer the entangled.
You like the entanglement. Yes. The future changes the past, and it's actually scientifically accurate. Quantum physics is considered to be the most accurate of all sciences, and it's fundamental to all sciences. And so it's the core of every science that you can imagine. It's the core of knowledge. It's how things basically function. And the physicists who deal with quantum physics, they really get into this in a deep way. And I'm going to do lots more shows on quantum physics and explain it more in depth. But just in terms of forgiveness, when you are in a relationship, you become quantumly entangled. So therefore, you are affecting each other no matter how far apart you are. So don't think that maybe you separate from someone or you get divorced, but if you haven't dealt with that stuff and you haven't forgiven that person, they still have power over you. On a physical level, there's still quantum entanglement occurring. You still have the toxic thought in your brain, and that person can be 10,000 miles away from you and thinking an irritated or bad thought about you, and it's as though they're right in front of you. So by forgiving, you disentangle, you separate, you cut that power of you physically break that power of that person contacting you, impacting your mind, and you can reconceptualize and build and get strong.
A curse without a cause will not alight.
There's a scripture that says a curse without a cause will not alight. So if you stay bitter, angry and twisted, even if you were the victim, you're actually breaking your own body down. So we're not making an excuse for that person's behavior, but what we are teaching is what I'm teaching you through the science of quantum physics and neuroscience and also spiritual principles, is that by forgiving, you are separating that person out of you, and you are actually developing your own healing of your own brain and your body.
So just to summarize, to help all those people there, it's forgiveness, obviously. It's the belief that you can get out of an addiction,
through choice.
Through choice, and it is very important that you have the support of a loving spouse, and you have an environment that you can work in, and virtually there's nothing that you can't overcome.
That's really good. There's nothing that you can't overcome. It's your choice. The big thing that we want to stress here is that Mac chose, and he didn't have any of those fatty liver disease or any of the side effects that you would normally get from the amount of alcohol that he consumed. There was an absolute miracle in his body. It was an instantaneous, from one moment to the next, he stopped drinking. But he chose. The big thing was that Mac chose, and he immediately chose to change how his life was running, and he was rewiring his brain, which enabled him to actually transfer the addiction to the correct addiction and rebuild love and focus back on the love of being married and children and that kind of thing. So choice is absolutely crucial in addiction, and this is a story. It's quite an emotional story, but it's a story with a happy ending, and you can have a happy ending too, because you really do control your realities. You do control your future through your choices. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for joining Mac and I today.
It's always a pleasure being with you.
Thank you for sharing that story, because I know it's quite tough. I mean, it's a tough one
it's
to
very
deal with.
important. I know this. There are people out there, husbands or wives, with the same thing, but just never give up. Keep praying, and
keep choosing.
Keep choosing, and know that choice can make that difference in your life. So, I encourage you all to really pray about it and ask God to help you in every single instance, and the Holy Spirit to give you wisdom.
Absolutely. And remember that as you choose, you change your brain, because with your mind you improve your mental health, you change your brain and you improve your life. You have a lot more power and hope in you than you realize. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Dr. Caroline Leaf, and this is the Dr. Leaf Show. Hi, I'm Dr. Caroline Leaf, and I'm so excited to tell you about my conference this year. We've got more sessions, we've got so many new exciting things, and one of the things I want to tell you about that's amazing is my Integrated Mind Network are going to be joining me again. This is a group of amazing doctors, neurologists, neuroscientists, neurosurgeons, MDs, PCPs, endocrinologists, OBGYNs, brilliant men and women who are going to be helping us to understand the mind-brain connection in terms of science. So there's going to be a Q&A with them. They're going to be doing individual presentations. It's going to be mind-blowing, because you're going in the good sense, because you're going to be seeing a lot of just how you can apply your lifestyle changes from a medical and scientific point of view. We've got more sessions. We've got so much happening. Join me this year in December in Dallas at my 2018 conference.